Listen, I'm going to make a long video where I show the difference between the spectra and the energy transmitted by natural light. First, then natural light, but with a window in between, then with the screen of my MacBook, then with a relatively warm lamp, a relatively warm bulb that's in my room, and then with a relatively energetic LED that's in my bathroom. Natural light. Light through the window. We have UV light, and we have much less red and infrared light. Now, you need to know that ultraviolet light is important for our mental clarity. The synthesis of vitamin D, the synchronization of our circadian rhythm, bone health, the immune system, and about many things that we aren't even aware of yet. Red light, on the other hand, is important for activating our circadian rhythm. Especially in the morning when we wake up, we need to see the sunrise. It's also important for energy and for tension. Infrared light, on the other hand, is very important for our blood circulation, shown for thermoregulation, by the way. Indeed, our temperature, which is something crucial, also the synchronization of circadian rhythm. And to reduce inflammation, which, can be very harmful when it becomes chronic. You saw that I placed the spectrometer directly against the window, and not 1 or 2 meters away. This is actually more representative of our situation. Inside a room, that is to say, when we're at the office, for example, we might be about 2 meters away from a window rather than right in front of it. Also, the spectrometer shows the visible spectrum here, and not the ultraviolet and infrared. But take a good look to the left and right at the ends. In fact, we can easily guess that they are present in natural conditions. When I put the spectrometer outside, and they are absent, meaning that the peaks on the far left and right are missing. They disappear once I'm on the other side of the window inside. We're off to the MacBook. This is what it looks like. It's not really natural light. Now I'm going to walk to my bathroom, but I'll show you the change in lighting conditions. Here we go. Natural light. Light directly after the window. Light. Actually, in fact, when the window is closed, we're off. You go, I have my elbow on the switch. I'm placing the spectrometer at eye level. I'm going to try to get exactly the energy. Nanometers, we have the peak, which is at 9.2, a peak at 449 nanometers, 20.9 microwatts per square centimeter per nanometer. In energy, if I bring it even closer, there you go. In any case, a peak at 449 nanometers, and so 20.9 in, I think, microwatts per square centimeter per nanometer. Now, we're going to do the same thing by inserting the crush and tune with the varnish. So, if we have an energy of 0.1, okay, and now I'm going to do it with the greens from major optical chains and blue light blocking glasses, which only blocks below 410 nanometers, which therefore doesn't block the relevant range of vanguard light. When we're in front of screens or anyway, exposed to artificial light, actually, I'm trying not to catch natural light. There you go. You see, it serves a purpose. It serves a purpose. And the color of the lens is not proof of its effectiveness. This same lens can be tinted yellow or red, making you believe in an effectiveness that, in reality, isn't there. So, be careful with glasses that are sold cheaply and quickly, claiming that these lenses are supposedly blue light blocking. This is the famous test that is useless because this emitter in fact does not represent blue light. I'm thinking about wavelength ranges around 400 nanometers. I'll check with my spectrometer. So, go. Similarly, I'm going to show you here that it blocks below 410 nanometers. It's not easy. There you go. We're almost in the dark just for science to see what this laser really emits. This is the laser represents. Okay. We're in my bathroom in the dark and it's a wavelength at 399. So, it's very important to understand that these so-called transparent lenses, which have a slight yellow tint, are both ineffective on what we want them to be effective, and bad for your health. Ineffective because in fact it doesn't block the wavelength range that matters. It doesn't block 450 nanometers, it blocks below 410 nanometers. It supposedly blocks 95% of blue light, but in fact it's below 410 nanometers. So basically that's the marketing argument, and it doesn't represent anything clinically relevant. There is no effect on the symptoms of digital eye strain, migraines, retinal protection, circadian rhythm synchronization, etc. Now, bad for your health, why? Precisely because they block below 410 nanometers. They are effective below 410 nanometers, so they block a small part of the natural blue light. Because generally these blue light blocking glasses brands and the big optical chains tell you to wear them during the day. And so this small part of blue light is between 380 and 410 nanometers. And below 380 nanometers, it's ultraviolet. Now, UV rays are vital. They help us synchronize our circadian rhythm, release serotonin, dopamine, and a lot of physical and psychological processes. Because the eye is a privileged window to the outside world. Second point, it's also important to understand this nuance. If you make a lens that is truly effective against blue light, then the lens inevitably becomes darker. On the other hand, as I told you, the color of a lens itself is not proof of its effectiveness. So, basically A implies B. But that doesn't mean that B implies A. And the third point, if you make a lens that is really too effective against blue and green light, or even red light, then the lens will be too uncomfortable. So it's really about finding both good effectiveness but not going too far. As Aristotle said, it's the middle ground that needs to be found. I'm still in front of my bathroom, in relatively low light conditions, which allows for being representative. And this, you need to know this accessory, that all the TikTokers and content creators have today. We're going to test it, because this is even worse, because we're looking right into the eyes. Alright, being somewhat representative, we're going to put it here, but we're not going to stick it. Here you go. This is what it emits while being truly representative at the level of our eyes. It has an energy for microwatts per square centimeter per nanometer, and if we stick it, it's pretty intense, I think, at 50. Now let's say we're protecting ourselves with a good solution. I'm going to press the button that's right here. Go. So here, of course, we can see that there's no longer that peak of blue light, and we can still see that there's this red light and a little bit of green light, because we need to see something in our modern society if we want to live in the evening. In any case, in terms of energy, we've gone down to 0.5. We're off to this light now. Okay. Same, it's the same peak. No longer there. We've gone down to 1 microwatt per cm2 per nanometer. So, through this video, you've been able to see the difference between the natural light conditions that we are normally made for as human beings. Then there are the light conditions we experience when we're just simply in a room, even though it's daytime outside, which is bad for health. So being indoors, because we block ultraviolet light, we don't have the same light spectrum as you've seen. Then you've been able to see, especially after sunset when it gets dark, when we light up with our artificial lights, what it does to the light spectrum. And as you know, it's the shorter wavelengths that are the most energetic. I'll quickly put the screenshots of my ebook here. You can pause. Blue light is therefore 1.8 times more energetic than red light, as you can see on this paper. And that's what has the most impact on our photoreceptors, on our retina, and particularly on the secretion of melatonin, which does not depend on the photoreceptors, but which depends on the cells I've already talked about 1,000 times. The iPRGCs, the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells are involved in the non-visual retinal pathways. They extend all the way into the hypothalamus. So beyond the hypothalamus, we have a neural pathway that goes to the pineal gland, which is responsible for melatonin secretion. When the iPRGCs, especially the M1 type, see light, even in the evening in our modern society, they have this photopigment called melanopsin, which tells the brain not to sleep. Also, I read something interesting quite recently, and to make a long story short, that dopamine increases the transcription of melanopsin in the iPRGCs and thus increases the sensitivity of the photoreceptors. I'm going to explain quickly. Transcription, you know that. Well, basically the transcription of DNA into RNA ultimately allows for the production of proteins, and melanopsin is a protein. So, my interpretation, and I could be wrong, it's that maybe in the evening, when we experience too much pleasure or move around too much, because to simplify it, dopamine is pleasure, the reward, but also movement, motivation, and the perception of time. In short, when we do this in the evening, when we're on Instagram at night and we have too much dopamine release, we actually increase our sensitivity to insomnia, particularly through these iPRGCs, through this melanopsin, and through other mechanisms. Of course, now the best way to protect yourself from the suppression of melatonin secretion that makes you feel sleepy and regulates all the other things I've already talked about, it's to avoid exposure to artificial light in the evening. It's about aligning to the sun. Be less exposed and especially try to keep your eyes away from high energy LEDs as much as possible. If you have to do it, I'm going to allow myself to give this medical advice but still avoid taking hormone pills. So, melatonin pills which don't mix well with your sex hormones that have extreme variability. That is to say, you take a pill for XMG and in reality you either have 0.15 times that dose, so 15% is like 450%, range 0.50 and 4.5 times. On prescriber.org, you can read that melatonin pills are less effective than a placebo, that is to say, a gel with nothing in it. And so, the best way is to avoid exposure to artificial lights. And if you have to be exposed to it, in that case, protect yourself from artificial light. That's the end of this video. Feel free to ask your questions in the comments if you have any. It has become the main mission of my life. On one hand, to make people understand the impact of their overexposure to artificial blue light on their lives, especially after sunset. So, when I talk about their lives, I mean their health, their performance, their overall well-being, even their capacity. I want to say social. On their anxiety, on their mood, sleep, metabolic health, hormonal health, learning ability, concentration, productivity. Our entire life is regulated by our circadian rhythm. So that's, on one hand, to help them understand that impact, but on the other hand, to also enable them to achieve their dreams. Despite this obstacle that is artificial blue light, and this obstacle integrates into our circadian rhythm, into respecting our natural rhythms. Now, I think that respecting our natural rhythms is part of our first fundamental. I'm going to share with you the other fundamentals that I believe in. This is just my personal opinion. So that's second, nutrition and hydration. Third is physical activity. Fourth is love. Fifth, guiding principle, having a purpose in life. With a B, because sometimes I have a broken nose. I say a B instead of a B. I'm finishing this video. Stay strong, and always stay clear-sighted.